Every game begins the same way.
Birdland faithful, today I need to talk with you about one of our front office's most questionable decisions from this past offseason. A choice that's proven increasingly disastrous for our Birds' future. I'm talking about the Tyler ONeill signing, a move that seemed promising on paper, but in practice is turning into a real nightmare for Mike Elias and the entire Orioles organization. When the 2024 season ended, we all knew we'd face one of the most challenging off seasons in the franchise's recent history. We had two fundamental players who would become free agents. Anthony Santander, our primary slugger with 44 home runs that season, and Corbin Burnes, the undisputed ace of our rotation. Losing these two athletes represented a massive hole in both our offensive lineup and pitching staff, especially considering Santander was statistically responsible for leading our power hitting production throughout the entire campaign. The pressure on the front office was immense. Fans expected aggressive moves in the market, significant investments to maintain the competitiveness we'd built in recent years. Mike Elias knew he needed to act quickly to fill these gaps, especially in the outfield, where Santander's departure would leave an enormous void. It was in this context of urgency and necessity that the idea of signing Tyler ONeill was born, coming off a solid season with the Boston Red Sox. What seemed like an intelligent market solution, taking advantage of an available player who had shown considerable potential, quickly transformed into one of the worst contractual decisions of the modern Orioles era. The 3-year, $49.5 million contract offered to ONeill represented a substantial investment for an organization that has historically been cautious with free agent spending. It was a clear signal that the franchise was willing to spend to compete, but unfortunately chose the wrong player to receive this type of financial confidence. Birdland friends, when we analyze this signing more deeply, it becomes evident there were clear warning signs that should have been considered much more seriously by our front office. Tyler ONeill has always been a high-risk, high-reward player, known both for his impressive power and his concerning propensity for injuries throughout his entire professional career. The numbers don't lie, and any serious statistical analysis of ONeill's career revealed an extremely worrying pattern. Throughout his entire major league journey, he managed to play more than 100 games on just 2 occasions. This data alone should have triggered every possible alert in Baltimore's meeting rooms. We're talking about a sport where availability is one of the most valuable qualities a player can offer, and ONeill historically has always had difficulties staying on the field consistently. The 2024 season with the Boston Red Sox, which served as a showcase for his signing by the Orioles, was actually an exception in his career, not the rule. During that year, ONeill managed to stay relatively healthy and produce solid offensive numbers that caught the attention of several franchises in the free agent market. However, a more thorough analysis should have taken into account the player's entire history, not just one atypical season in terms of health. From a contractual standpoint, the agreement offered by the Orioles was structured in a way that benefited the player much more than the franchise. The contract included an opt-out clause after the first season, which meant that if ONeill had an exceptional year, he could leave freely in search of an even more lucrative contract. On the other hand, if he faced injury problems or performance issues, he would be protected by the remaining 2 years of the deal. It was essentially a bet where the Orioles assumed all the risks and ONeill kept all the potential rewards. The front office's strategy seemed to be betting on ONeill's ability to replicate his 2024 season, hoping he could adequately fill the void left by Anthony Santander. Unfortunately, this bet not only failed miserably, but also became a significant financial burden for an organization that needs to be extremely careful with every dollar invested in player salaries. Folks, we've reached the most painful point of this analysis. Tyler ONeill's current numbers wearing our Orioles uniform are simply unacceptable by any professional standard, especially considering the financial investment made by the franchise. We're talking about a player who is hitting just .2, 2293 by 434 in 43 games, with a mere 8 home runs and 23 RBIs. Numbers that are particularly disappointing when compared to what Anthony Santander was producing in the same position. But what makes this situation even more frustrating is the fact that O'Neill has spent much of the season in the medical department, confirming exactly the fears that should have prevented this signing from the beginning. His injuries not only limited his statistical contribution, but also forced the team to constantly improvise in the outfield, creating tactical instability that affected the entire team's offensive dynamics. When you lose a player of Anthony Santander's caliber, who not only produced consistently, but was also available to play virtually every day, the expectation is that the replacement can at least approach that reliability. Instead, the Orioles found themselves with a player who, when healthy, shows glimpses of his potential, but simply can't maintain the consistency necessary to justify even a fraction of the investment made. The situation becomes even more complicated when we analyze the contractual implications, with O'Neill clearly not having a season that would justify using his opt-out clause. The Orioles are stuck with him for the next 2 years at a salary of $16.5 million annually. For a franchise that traditionally operates with more conservative budgets, this represents a significant amount that will be tied up by a player who so far hasn't demonstrated the ability to contribute at an expected level. The impact goes beyond individual numbers. O'Neill's lack of production created a domino effect throughout the entire lineup, forcing other players to take on additional responsibilities and completely altering the offensive dynamics that had been planned for the season. The Birds lost not only the direct production they expected from O'Neill, but also the tactical flexibility that a reliable and productive outfielder provides to the manager during games. Birdland, we need to face reality. This signing represents a turning point in how our organization should approach the free agent market going forward. The consequences of the decision to sign Tyler O'Neill go far beyond this season and will have direct repercussions on future trading windows and the Orioles' ability to compete at a high level in coming years. First, from a financial standpoint, the remaining $33 million on O'Neill's contract represents significant dead weight on the team's payroll. For a franchise that needs to be extremely selective with its investments, especially when it comes to renewing young talents like Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, and other pillars of our future, every poorly spent dollar becomes a multiplied problem. The money being used to pay O'Neill could be directed toward contract extensions for players truly fundamental to the franchise's long-term success. Additionally, this situation exposes a fundamental flaw in our front office's player evaluation philosophy. Mike Elias and his team, who were widely praised for their analytical and careful approach in rebuilding the franchise, made a basic error by prioritizing potential over reliability. In a sport where availability is often more valuable than pure ability, betting on a player with an extensive injury history was a questionable decision from the start. The most important lesson to be extracted from this experience is the need for a more holistic approach in evaluating free agents. It's not enough to analyze just the offensive numbers from one specific season. It's fundamental to consider the player's complete history, especially in aspects like durability, consistency, and adaptability to different tactical systems. The O'Neill case serves as a painful reminder that in baseball, as in any investment, it's better to be too conservative than too aggressive with limited resources. Looking ahead, the Orioles need to use this experience as learning for future decisions. The organization must return to the principles that made it successful in rebuilding: calculated investments, focus on player durability, and prioritization of athletes who fit perfectly into the team's culture and tactical system. The O'Neill mistake shouldn't discourage future free agent investments, but should serve as a guide for smarter and more sustainable choices. The Baltimore Orioles signing of Tyler O'Neill for 3 years and $49.5 million is proving to be a complete disaster. With just a .210 batting average in 43 games and constant injury problems, O'Neill failed to adequately replace Anthony Santander, leaving the Orioles stuck with a burdensome contract for the next 2 years. So Birdland crew, what do you think about this Tyler O'Neill situation? Do you believe he can still turn around this disastrous season, or is it time to accept that this was one of the worst signings of the Mike Elias era? And more importantly, what should the Orioles' strategy be for the next offseason, especially considering we have this heavy contract limiting our financial flexibility? Don't forget to give this video a like if you agree with my analysis. Comment your opinions about ONeill's future, and our birds. And subscribe to the channel to keep receiving exclusive analyses and daily updates about everything happening with the Baltimore Orioles. Together we are stronger, and that's how our birdland achieves great things. Until the next video.